can't believe we've gotten this far into the retreat already. It just goes so quickly. Well, I talked a couple of days ago about my story of illness, and I want to pick up there because I left one little bit off. So if you remember, I was standing there next to my bed in the dark and suffering greatly. And I realized that this is the only moment I have. And if I'm not alive and present in this moment, I've lost it all. So when I did that, my suffering began to shift, and it got better and better, easier and easier. It wasn't easy, but it was easier. And then I went back to the doctor. The doctor gave me this last medication on the list, and lo and behold, the first night I took it, I slept like a baby. It was so delicious and so wonderful. I can't believe how great it feels to sleep 8 hours. Wow. Oh, like I couldn't be happier. And then I got up and I went to sit with Morning Light Sangha, and I went to sit on my cushion, and I injured my back. On the way from behind this high to behind this high, I tore a disc in my back. So I spent the next 4 to 6 weeks walking with a cane. But you know what was different? I didn't suffer at all. I didn't suffer at all. And the only explanation I have for that was that something shifted in me when I had the resolution to see through my suffering. And so the next suffering that came was different. Who knows what happens when the next one comes? But that was quite a relief for me. So today I want to talk about liberation. Talked a lot about suffering, but liberation. That's where I want to go. I want to talk about what liberation is. I want to talk about some practices that might lead us towards liberation. I want to do an exercise together. And I want to end with a kind of a review of what we've received so far. So if you're with me, I'll get going. Yeah? Okay. Well, I want to talk about liberation, but liberation's a really hard thing to talk about. Suffering's an easy thing to talk about. And the reason it's so easy is because suffering is made up of concepts and ideas. And what are words? Concepts and ideas. So they just go together like peanut butter and chocolate. They just are, they're so easy. But liberation's not like that. Liberation isn't made of concepts and words. Liberation is the absence of those things. So how do we talk about that? Ultimately, we have to experience liberation directly for ourselves. No one can give it to you with words. It'd be like going to a restaurant and looking at the menu and expecting to know what the food tastes like. You can know what the menu looks like. You can read the words, but until you get the chocolate sundae, you don't know what it tastes like. And liberation's a bit like that. But luckily, we have this great teacher that's been with us this whole time, and that this teacher has been teaching me a lot about liberation. And I want to use that teacher to maybe get an idea across to you of what it is. And it's the bell. It's a beautiful bell. The bell and the inviter inter-are. And we can think of the inviter as the source of our suffering. Maybe this inviter's like something that happened to you where you get a slap in the face, a punch in the gut, an insult thrown at you, a sharp shock. And how we respond to that percussion, that suffering moment, is what really matters. And that's what the bell has been teaching me. So if we bring this inviter into contact with the bell, we could think of this as a moment of suffering for the bell. Who wants to get hit? I don't want this thing hitting me on the head. I don't know what the bell thinks, but none of us want to get hit. That's our suffering. But what does the bell do? It immediately lets go and sings the song of liberation. Let's listen to that. The bell didn't waste its life like I did in the middle of the night, wanting it to be different. The bell receives this shock and instantly sings the song of liberation. Doesn't waste any time at all. So I think, well, okay, if the bell's so great and the bell's singing a song of liberation, why don't we just get rid of the inviter? Let's just get rid of this thing. I mean, it's the cause of suffering, right? Let's just get rid of it. Sounds like a great idea. Like, okay, I'll just, like, you're out of here. So now let's just listen to the bell sing all by itself. Okay? Nothing. Nothing. No mud, no lotus, no inviter, no bell. The bell needs the suffering to sing its song of liberation. But you might say, well, that's fine. You know, suffering is sometimes like that. Sometimes it's a short, sharp shock. But mine lays on my back like a weight. It won't let me go. What do we do about that? Well, the bell has been teaching me about that too. The bell has shown me what to do to gain liberation anytime. So listen very, very closely because this is very subtle. But listen for the sound of when we do a half bell and we lay the inviter on top of the bell. That's repressing the bell in some way, right? It's repressing it from singing its song of liberation. But then we lift the inviter off the bell, and the song of the bell changes immediately. But it's very subtle. So listen carefully. Give all your attention to the sound of the bell. Listen again for the moment this comes off the bell. I've been listening to that all week, and in the dark, when I hear Carla do the stop on the bell and lift the inviter off, and I hear the sound open up, I hear freedom. That's the sound of liberation to me. So like us, we need the burden lifted off of us to really sing our song of liberation, just like the bell does. The bell doesn't sing very well like this, with this laying on its back. But we can lift the weight of the inviter off our back with practices. And I want to offer some practices that we can use to do that. So the most important thing that we can do to lift the weight of suffering off our back is go straight into the heart of our suffering. It's counterintuitive. As we could see with the bell, if we get rid of what we think is our suffering, we sing no song at all. So we have to go right into the heart of it and become intimate with it. And I want to suggest three things that I mean when I say become intimate with our suffering. So the first one is to be willing to feel our suffering and to hold it with love. Be willing to feel our suffering and hold it with love. And the second one is I have to be willing to transform the habits that cause me to suffer. And the third, I have to be willing to surrender the belief that I'm a separate self. I want to talk about these three things. And I'll start by talking about the first two. And I'd like to use a metaphor that sort of points at these first two. And the metaphor is about a wall. A wall. And from the beginning of our lives, suffering has been present for us, for all of us. All of us were born these perfect, little, beautiful beings. And as soon as we entered the world was imperfect in some way, didn't meet our needs in some way. Some people are born into worlds that are horrifically filled with suffering. And some of us are born into worlds that are just a little not quite right. But still, the experience is the same for all of us. We are born into an imperfect world. Our families aren't perfect. Our culture isn't perfect. Our bodies aren't perfect. So our response when we're born into this imperfect world is being a baby, of course, a young child. We will blame ourselves and say, my fault. I did this to myself. I'm unlovable. I'm whatever. We've been talking about that quite a bit. And that intense vulnerability we don't want to feel. So we begin to build a wall. We begin to build a wall out of the fear and the pain. And every time something happens, we put another stone in our wall, another stone. And we think, okay, I feel really vulnerable. That imperfect world is scary. So I'm going to wall myself off from it. And that surely will protect me. Then I'll be okay. And so we build a wall with our thoughts and with our actions and with particularly our negative emotions, our fear and our greed and our jealousy and our hatred and our resentment, and we could list them all day. There's a lot to build our wall with. So we've built this wall over time, more and more rocks, thinking that we're walling ourselves off from what will hurt us. But in actuality, what we've been doing is we've been building a wall that keeps us from our true self, from our true nature. And we've been building a wall that keeps us in with all of the habits of suffering that we use to build that wall. I've been enjoying studying some medieval English history recently. And it's so interesting. It's like the folks in medieval England just personified this. You can see these castles, the early castles that they built. They would dig out a big moat and take all that earth and pile it up in there and in the middle, and then they'd put a wall around the inside, and then they put a wall around the outside. And I imagine them sitting there thinking, great, I'm safe now. And then they have to sit inside that. And they can't go out. And they pollute the moat with sewage. And it stinks. It's no fun. So I just think we, as humans, we recreate our minds everywhere. Yeah. So most of us live our entire lives not even knowing we have a wall and living this life of deprivation, life not touching our true nature. Maybe you felt a little bit of that when you arrived here. You were going about your daily life. You're out there driving around, doing all this stuff. And it didn't feel like you were behind a wall. But when you came into the retreat environment, we slowed down. We made more space. And maybe you started to see that, oh, wait a minute, it's a lot happier on this side than it was on that side. Oh. How do we practice with this wall? Well, practice is what helps us deconstruct our wall. We've spent our life building it, and when we start practicing, we can begin to take it down. And it seems to me that there's two broad ways that we dismantle our wall, and one is accidental and one is intentional. So accidentally, sometimes our wall cracks maybe by itself, and we see through. And I imagine this has happened to all of us here in this room. We have these moments of insight, these moments of freedom. Probably if you didn't, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't have any reference point to why you want to deepen this practice. So I trust that you know this already. And they say that we can't control whether or not an accident comes, but we can practice well to make ourselves accident prone. And the more you practice, maybe the more those accidents just happen. It's happened to me a number of times on this retreat. The very first morning, walking down toward the little cabins where Michael and I are staying, this gorgeous backlit wall of fog, and the beautiful big leaf maple right behind it, all golden. Just a crack in my wall right there. You've probably had similar experiences. I had a lot of accidental cracks in my wall for a period in my practice. And this lasted more than 10 years, where I would be sitting on the cushion and minding my own business, and all of a sudden, a sob would come out of me. Just rise up out of I don't know where, one deep, heartfelt sob, and then over. And it happened pretty frequently for a while, and then infrequently for a while, and not so much anymore. But the way I pictured that was every time that happened, it felt like a stone fell out of my wall, and when it hit the ground, it vaporized into a sob. Some pain I was carrying, something that I'd been burdened by for a long time, just accidentally tumbled out and vaporized. Maybe some of you saw me doing that on the cushion. I just sobbed. And I trust you to know when this happens for you, because no one can tell you when you touch your liberation. No one can validate this for you. You don't come to someone and say, was this it? No, you know. You know. It's clear. It's clear. You don't have to justify it or explain it. You know it. So that's kind of the accidental part. We don't have a whole lot of control over that. But we can have some impact on the intentional ways that we take down our wall. And there are many practices in our tradition that are designed just for this. And so I can't talk about all of them, or it would take too long. But I just want to mention a few that have been important to me on my path. One that's been very, very helpful for me is the practice called labeling. And this I learned from Joko Beck, who's written a couple of really great books about that if you're interested in learning more about it. The practice of labeling is to watch very closely what's going on inside your mind and body. And when something arises, give it a simple label, not too specific, not too general, and you just say, rumination. Oh, planning. As it comes up, you simply name it for what it is. And this has a number of effects, but the ones I want to point out that I've found helpful is every time I label a thought that's going on in me, an experience that's going on in me, it loses power right away. I could be ruminating for a half an hour about something, and once I say, oh, rumination, it's like it just took the foundation out from under it, and it goes boom, and stops. So it loses its energy short term, and it loses its energy long term. Every time I do that, I make it less likely that I will ruminate in the future. So that's one big advantage. And another advantage that I found with that practice is it helps me know my own mind. And it is shocking what I found. I thought I was just going through life, making it up as I go and seeing things as they are. No, I have about 4 frequent thoughts that come up over and over and over and over again. And it became amusing when I started to label the same things over and over again. For me, planning comes up over and over again. Rumination comes up over and over again. Having a conversation with someone who is not here. Yeah, sound familiar? I do that. Usually it's to revise what happened in the past and make myself look better or have a different outcome than the one that happened. So it's things like this that I began to see. And then as soon as I start to see them come up again, I realize, oh, there you are, my old friend. You've come back to try and protect me again. How about you relax a bit? I've got this now. So I really like the practice of labeling, and if I could assign something to people, boy, that's the one I would assign because it has just had such a great impact on me. Um, I hope maybe you'll enjoy it too. Another practice I found quite effective for taking down my wall is the practice of ethics. And we've been touching that. We've touched it this morning with our 14 mindfulness trainings, and we have this beautiful ceremony tomorrow with the 5 precepts. Um, One of the things that is true about us that we don't want to face is told to us by the 5 remembrances. The last of the 5 remembrances is that I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. We don't want to face that, but it's actually true. What we do lives with us, lives on after us, creates our environment, affects the people around us. Some people call that karma. And this is why we have precepts, because our wall is largely made out of those things that we don't want to have come back and visit us. So if our wall is made of those, how about we have a practice that makes it less likely that we build our wall from these um, things like killing, stealing, lying, sexual infidelities. That's what's building our wall. So let's practice with that. Let's consciously um, build our life in such a way that it isn't making more stones than necessary. When I think about transforming my wall, one of the most pivotal moments for me was when I took the 5 mindfulness trainings. And I realized that they were not prohibitions, things that I couldn't do. They were actually protections. They were what prevented me from stumbling over and over and over again, doing the same unskillful things. That was an important moment. That felt liberating instead of restricting. And then there's the practice of metta, which Carla so beautifully spoke of, and which we sang at the fire pit. Those of you who were there at the fire pit, we sang the metta chant. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be happy. I took up the practice some months ago of the very first thing I do when I wake up is that chant. And I discovered it had to be the very first thing because within seconds, my mind was off and running and making suffering. My mind was thinking about what I'm going to do that day, what I left undone from the day before. Sometimes it was just a simple feeling of, oh, something's not right, as soon as I woke up. And I realized that I was putting the weight of my wall on me with the first breath of the day. So why not instead chant that? May I be filled with loving kindness, not rushing and anxiety and have to do, but loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be happy. You can't build a wall out of those things. That brings the wall down. The way I remember to practice gathas is I put sticky notes up all over the place. And I have sticky notes on my bathroom mirror, and I've got a sticky note on my dresser, and I've got a sticky note on the table right next to my bell, and it's been wonderful. I highly recommend it. Maybe that will help dissolve your wall too. The solvent that dissolves our wall is love. It's not a bulldozer. It's not a wrecking ball. It's not self-flagellation or anger. It's love. Down at the river when we walked there yesterday, the river is lined with these beautiful round rocks. They're so inviting. They're so lovely. And it occurs to me that those rocks have been worn down by that river, the Tahuya River, before it had the name Tahuya River, before the first native tribes were here that gave it that name, before there were any people, maybe before there were animals. Those rocks have been wearing down and wearing down. Before they started wearing down, I imagine there were lots of jagged edges, dangerous, sharp, harsh. But the water flowed and the water flowed and the water flowed, and it wore those rocks down, and it invited the little bits that were sharp to flow away, made into sand, also lovely to walk on. And this is how love wears away our wall. Our wall is built with those negative emotions that have sharp edges. And love just wears them down, softens them, makes them soothing instead of sharp. And we have to do that for ourselves. We have to offer love to ourselves. Love ultimately is all we have to offer ourselves. A lot of our wall was probably built with self-judgment, harshness, condemnation, thinking we're not enough. And we can only wear those sharp edges off with love. And in doing that, we learn that just like we only have love to offer ourselves, love is all we have to offer each other. You don't heal violence with more violence. You heal violence with love. You don't heal relationships with blame. You heal relationships with love. Love is the antidote to our suffering. And love is ultimately the only word I know that best describes liberation. When I feel liberation, it's indistinguishable from love. Mike and I are very fortunate people. We both get to work at a job that is basically institutionalized love. Uh, Both of us are chaplains, and I've worked as a chaplain in healthcare and cancer care and hospice, and Mike at Bailey Boucher, and now Mike gets to go into the emergency room at the hospital in Palm Springs that's busy, busy, busy with every imaginable horror coming through the door, and he gets to stand there and be love in the middle of all that. Our job as a chaplain is to walk into the middle of chaos and be love. There's nothing else we have to offer. We don't have the right prescription. We don't have the solution to their housing issues. We don't know how to help them with their drug addictions. We know how to love. And so on the one hand, our job is fantastically simple and easy. And on the other job, it's horribly difficult because we have no idea what we're going to face when we walk in a door to be with someone. We really want that wall back up because all of a sudden we might get hurt. I mean, I've had people throw stuff at me. I've been cussed at, all kinds of things. I don't know what's going to happen, but we're called to be love. Love is liberation. Love is liberation. Earlier on, I said there were three things I thought we should address about how to practice with our suffering. And I talked a little bit about feeling our suffering and holding it with love. I talked a little bit about seeing and transforming the ideas that cause our suffering. And now I want to talk about the third one, which is surrender. Surrender is a hard word, at least it was for me at first to hear, because surrender to me sounded like I'm giving up. It sounds like I am putting myself in harm's way. I'm willing to be dominated. But that's not what surrender is in this context. Surrender in this context means surrendering the belief that I am a separate self. Surrendering the belief that I am a separate self. I love reading the teachings of Ajahn Chah. You might be familiar with Ajahn Chah. He was a Thai forest master and just really succinct and beautiful in his teaching, very simple teachings. And he said this, if you want a little freedom, let go a little. If you want a lot of freedom, let go a lot. And if you want complete freedom, let go completely. And letting go completely is surrender. If you're letting go a little, there's still someone letting go. If you're letting go a lot, there's still someone letting go of something really important. But that person is still there. It's still the actor. Surrender means letting go of that which lets go. The image comes to mind is, we can let go, we can hang our coat up on the coat rack, right? We can let go of our coat. But the coat's still standing there. It hasn't completely let go. When we surrender, The coat rack disappears. All the coats come down. It's hard to imagine what that surrender feels like. So what I'd like to do is do a little exercise so we can feel the taste of surrender ourselves right here. Not as some big lofty idea we have to work towards, but no, right now, right here. So if you wouldn't mind settling into your posture where you feel comfortable. And I want to invite you to come back into your body. Aware of the sensation of the breath moving in and out. The sensation of your heart beating. And as you settle in this home that is you, I invite you to remember a time when you felt wronged. Maybe your beloved said something unkind to you. Maybe your boss gave you so much work that you just were overwhelmed. So touch into that memory of being wronged. And as you do, feel that part of you that rises in self-defense. Feel for the contraction in your body. Maybe your shoulders raised. Maybe your forehead tightened. Maybe your stomach started to twist. And now feel the contraction of your heart. The way your heart may have shrunken down, withdrawn, hardened. And feel the contraction of your mind. How rather than being wide open, it's now constricted, focused on me, blaming you. This is what you surrender. These contractions, these withdrawals, this is the separate self. You might enjoy taking a breath, breathing all that contraction in, all that pain, and breathing out complete freedom. Breathing in, I accept things as they are. Breathing out, I am free. Breathing in, I accept my suffering. Breathing out, I am liberated. The freedom that remains when we let go of this separate self is not constricted in any way. It is vast. It has everything you need to be safe. When you touch this, you know that your wall is no longer necessary. Freedom has nothing to defend because freedom is everything. Thank you for doing that. You may open your eyes and come back. For me, I make a practice of touching freedom with a single breath. Breathe in, life exactly as it is, and let completely everything go with the out-breath. It is so beautiful, and it's always there, always there. And that's what I want to say about liberation. There's not much you can say directly. You have to feel it. You have to feel it yourself. And I trust you to do that. I know you already have. And my deepest heartfelt wish for you is that you touch that over and over and over again until that becomes your home. And you trust it absolutely. So let's turn for the next few minutes our attention to what we have come through together so far on this journey. I'm thinking back to the day when we arrived, showing up with all our speed and momentum and, ferries and freeways and packing and making room for all the stuff. It's like parting the sea to come to a retreat. You do a lot on this side, and you make space in the middle, and you do a lot on that side. And so, that stuff's all in us. And so I'm remembering back to walking onto this land and beginning to slow that momentum. And as we did, the suffering that was not visible to us began to become visible. It was there all along, but we had too much momentum to see it. We had no room for it. And then we heard this beautiful talk from Michael. He told us that suffering is the path and the door and the key to our liberation. And liberation is our birthright. That we don't have to earn it, but we can learn it. And coming to this retreat is one way to learn it. And then we spend some time practicing with the wars inside ourselves. The war that rages between the way we want things to be and the way they are. Between like that and like this. That's our war. And then we heard from Karla so beautifully about how Mahapajapati and those first free women set their hearts on liberation. And they marched right to the heart of their suffering. And their reward was their liberation. And our reward was the fourfold Sangha. Without those women and their bravery to march right to the heart of their suffering, we wouldn't enjoy this. Our waking up would be that much more difficult. And then today we explored how we build walls that we think protect us from vulnerability, but actually become our prisons. And that the only real way out of that prison is to dissolve those walls with love and to surrender this belief that we are a separate self that needs a wall at all. So that's where we've been. But we're not done. We're not done. We have 24 more hours of retreat. And I know from my own experience, about this time, my mind can start moving to the future. All right, it's starting to think about what I've got to do to get out of here, packing, cleaning, what's going to await me, all that stuff. It's coming for us. Yeah. But please, please, don't go there. Don't waste these last few precious hours that we have. This is so precious that we can come together like this and create this container. So as my teacher used to say, take yourself by the hand. Come back. Don't allow that impulse to race into the future own you. Don't let that be a stone in your wall. Give yourself the gift of being here, fully here, until you leave, and then you can be fully there. Give yourself the gift of enjoying this Sangha and the power of this Sangha. When you get home, it won't be with you. You'll feel it. So be here. Be with this Sangha. It feels like we've been ripening. We've spent a number of days ripening. And it seems like we are now, like those apples on the tree, we are ripening and ripening and ripening. Please don't pick the fruit off your tree before it's ripe. Don't pick it right now. It's not ripe. Wait till at the end of this retreat it naturally falls from the tree. Then go home. Go home liberated and free.